Yeah, and hello to you all, everyone. So my name is Lewis Bone, and a big warm welcome to you all for today's webinar. So our webinar today is called Inspiring Motivation and Positive Classroom Culture Online. And I'm Lewis. I'm the Online Schools Development Manager here at Cambridge, and it's good to be with you all here today hosting this session. So a bit of context as to why we thought this was important first. So as more learners choose to study online around the world, the need to foster strong motivation and a supportive, well-managed classroom culture, it's arguably never been more important. It's not just about delivering the content, it's about building connection, purpose, and belonging in a digital space. So in the first half of today's session, I'm going to share some of the most effective strategies and insights drawn from research and from our own work at Cambridge Online Schools. We'll look at what motivates students, how we create trust and structure online, and how teachers can build the kind of culture where learners genuinely can thrive. Then I'm going to have the pleasure to hand over to Pavel Novichok, who is joining us today from a Cambridge-approved online school, Bruton Lloyd Online School. He's going to take us inside some of the classrooms to show how these ideas are being put into practice every day and mention some of the tools that they use to achieve this. And so at the end of the session, we're going to be joined, as mentioned by Kathleen, by Matt James, who is the head of online education at Cambridge. He's going to facilitate the Q&A, so please feel free to drop some questions into the Q&A function as we go, which will get picked up later. And we hope that you'll leave today with some inspiration, some knowledge of practical tools that you'll be able to adapt to your own teaching style. So let's get started. So a quick whiz through the agenda. We're going to be looking, as I said, at why classroom culture is important. That's always a very sensible place to start. We're going to look at Cambridge's registration standards and how that ties in. We're going to look at some evidence-based practices, some outcomes of some research from Cambridge. We'll be handing over to Bruton Online School, and I'll be looking at some further reading recommendations that I've put aside to give you all, and then finally with the Q&A. So in any classroom, whether it's a physical classroom or an online classroom, learning doesn't just depend, as you should probably all know, on content or curriculum. It depends on the people who are involved in this process. And in an online environment where students are physically apart, the importance of motivation and classroom culture arguably becomes even more important. So motivation is what drives students to engage, persist, and to take real ownership of their learning. But without the energy of a physical classroom, those little subtle social cues, the sense of shared space, it's much easier for students online to perhaps drift into a degree of disengagement. So that's why we can't start with the tools. It's why we have to start with humans. And there's a quote here that I like. It's by Morris and Stommel. They remind us that far too much work in educational technology, it always starts with the tools when what we need to start with is humans. So a positive classroom culture, it helps fill the gap that distance can create. It fosters connection, belonging, and trust. It tells students that you matter here, your voice belongs here, and this really is a place where you can thrive. And up to now, I've maybe been talking about motivation and behavior as two separate things, but they're not separate challenges. They're two sides of the same coin, because a motivated student is more likely to behave constructively, and a supportive culture keeps that motivation alive. So to emphasize, this isn't just about better tools or clever strategies. It's about creating the conditions where human connection and therefore real meaningful learning can actually thrive online. So at Cambridge, we hold a really clear and consistent expectation for what quality looks like in any school, physical or online for that matter. And I'm conscious that many of you today will be joining us from online or physical schools, so a lot of this is broadly applicable. So, and that expectation, it includes how we support student motivation and create a respectful, really well-managed classroom culture. So what you can see on the screen here, these are what we call the Cambridge registration standards. They're the core requirements that all online schools must meet to gain and maintain approval. These standards, they're very similar to those of a physical school approval and would apply globally. And what they do is they form the basis of every new online school application that we assess. We're also going to share these with you later as well, if any of you are trying to very quickly write them down. So the standards that I'm about to highlight here, they're the ones that directly relate to student motivation, classroom culture, and behavior. So in the left-hand column here, you'll see that schools must demonstrate that relationships between students and teachers are positive, respectful, and that the school has a clear and consistent expectation of behavior. And this isn't a suggestion, it's an absolute requirement. So moving along a few columns, under quality of teaching and learning, we require evidence that teachers respond to students' individual needs, interests, and learning styles. And that right there is essentially it's motivation in action. It recognizes that learners are not all the same and adapting to keep them engaged, and the emphasis on that. And when it comes to the online provision itself, in the fourth column here, schools must make sure that the technology supports not only access, but that that's a safe and an inclusive and collaborative learning environment. And these aren't just theoretical ideals, they're what I would describe as non-negotiable standards. And if an applicant school cannot demonstrate these through their systems, their practices, and their classroom experience, we simply don't approve them. And that's how central we believe motivation and positive culture are to a successful online education. It's not just optional, it's foundational. But before we go any deeper into what we know works to generate these, I wanted to just pause, step back very briefly, and acknowledge what are some common misconceptions that we've probably all heard. Perhaps some of us have maybe even believed them at some point, myself not excluded in the past. But these are some understandable assumptions, but they can quietly undermine engagement in an online classroom if not addressed or acknowledged or even confronted. So let's take a look at the first one. If students are quiet, they must be learning. That might be true occasionally, but more often than not, in an online setting, silence can be perceived as a bit of a red flag. In successful online environments, we see students actively asking questions, reacting in chats, participating in polls, reflecting back ideas. Another one we hear here is the second one down. It's let's just do the same as we did in the physical classroom and just transfer that online. But the reality, and I'd learned this very abruptly when I was a teacher during COVID and then all of a sudden had to teach online overnight. The reality is that online teaching is its own ecosystem. It has its own needs, its different pacing, there needs to be clearer directions and built-in structures for collaboration. So there's also the temptation to over-rely on tech, looking down now at the next one down on the list. So the newest platform or the new shiny feature that they might have introduced in an LMS, say, it might really seem exciting, but if it doesn't serve a clear pedagogical purpose, it can just arguably add noise. And perhaps the most dangerous myth about there with online classrooms is that we simply don't have time for culture building, and that's actually applicable to all educational institutions. Whereas actually, I'd argue the complete opposite. It's the time that's taken into building the culture that creates all of the conditions that I've mentioned so far that allows for any learning to happen at all. So it's not a chore, it's an absolute fundamental. And finally, there is the camera debate. So yes, we want to see faces, but real engagement isn't measured by who's on screen. It's about how students show up intellectually and emotionally, not only visually. So the good news is, once we recognize these myths, we can move past them and focus on what truly works. That's with intention, with consistency, and with a humane, holistic approach. So at Cambridge, we've got more than 60 approved online schools. You can see those represented here on the left. And of those 60 online schools, there are 10,000 global online students, which you can see represented on the right, spread out across continents and across countries. And I'm in a really privileged position in my role because I'm fortunate enough to observe lots of online learning, and I speak with outstanding committed teams in online schools. So based on my observations and interactions, here is what I've seen works to motivate students into positive engagement. So first, offering choice and autonomy gives students a sense of ownership, whether it's how they complete a task or which topic they research. Autonomy I've seen to really drive engagement. Secondly, variety matters. So using engaging, relevant content that reflects their world. This can be stories, videos, games, interactive polls. Relevance is one of the most strongest motivators that I've seen in any online context. So students also, for the third point, need structure and consistency. Of course, this can be true of any online or any educational institution, but in online, I find this to be incredibly important. Simple routines like clear lesson formats or weekly check-ins, all of these reduce anxiety and to really help the student feel grounded. So feedback is key. Regular, encouraging, and specific feedback helps students in online contexts understand where they are and what to do next. And of course, crucially, it builds their confidence. Relationships matter online more than ever. So starting lessons with a quick check-in, a chat, or a question or a story about your evening, something about their day that helps build that connection and trust over the distance that the screen puts in place. And also, we must also celebrate diversity and student voice. So there are activities that you could use that invite students to share their experiences or perspectives. And all of these create a really rich and inclusive classroom where the students have a greater stake in the voice of their school. So also invite students to help set classroom norms. It gives them a stake in the culture that they're taking part in and really helps boost ownership and responsibility. And collaboration is crucial, whether it's a shared writing task, a group project, or a breakout group quiz. Working together builds community and deepens learning. And you'll remember from my previous slides that this is a non-negotiable standard for any Cambridge online school that wants approval with us, that collaboration we see as being absolutely fundamental to a positive classroom culture online. Ensure communication is inclusive. So some students thrive on voice discussion, others in chats or on forums. Offering multiple ways for online students to participate ensures that everybody's voice is heard. And finally, model a growth mindset. So praise effort, praise persistence, not just the correct answers. Let students see that setbacks, even in an online context, is a part of life and a part of learning. It's not something to fear. And the final slide from me comes now, and it's worth reflecting before I move on. It's just that what does success actually look like in an online classroom where students are motivated and the culture is positive? So at Cambridge, we recently concluded a significant piece of research, actually, that focuses in on classroom culture and belonging in an online learning space. So the full findings of the research and the report, they're going to be shared a bit later this year, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, I wanted to share at a bit of a high-level glance some of the key observations that that research project found that contributed to a thriving and motivated online classroom. So in successful online classrooms, you'll often see students actively engaged, not just responding to questions, but really initiating conversations, supporting peers in breakout groups, or confidently sharing in the chat. Participation becomes something they value, not just something that they are expected to do. You'll also see teachers deliberately building relationships. That's through check-ins, through humor, through anecdotes, or just making the space for students to share a bit about themselves. These little touches foster trust and enormous amounts of connection. A strong sense of structure and consistency underpins absolutely everything. So students know the flow of the lesson, what's expected of them, how to succeed, which really frees them up to focus and to contribute. And crucially, you see student ownership. Learners are tracking their progress, they're meeting deadlines and holding themselves to the highest of standards because they've been trusted to do so. And that trust is really motivating to them. It develops intrinsic motivation. And finally, you see a sense of shared purpose. That's a classroom where students feel a part of a community, where they are respected and really where they're heard. So that's what success looks like in an online classroom, where there's motivation and a positive culture. So please keep an eye out for the research that's going to be released, as I say, like later on this year. But for now, what I would like to do is I will conclude my portion of the webinar, and I would like to hand over to Pavel, who is going to talk to us about what some of these things might look like in action at Bruton Lloyd Online School. Hello, Pavel.
Hi, Lewis. Thank you very much for the introduction. So, hello, everyone. My name is Pavel Novichkov. I'm head of academics at Bruton Lloyd Online School. And I would like to start by briefly explaining why we chose to become a Cambridge-approved online school in the first place. If Lewis could, change the slide. So we saw a growing demand from overseas families who wanted access to the internationally recognized quality education that the UK system offers, but without being tied to a physical school. Many of our students are relocating or living abroad and need academic structure, continuity, and flexibility. So our goal was not to simply replicate a traditional school online. Instead, we set out to rethink what high-quality education could look like in a digital space. And that meant ultimately preserving rigor, accountability, and strong pastoral care, and not compromising on any of those. So we run relatively small classes, typically just 3 to 6 students, and that lets us focus on IGCSE and A-level programs with full academic continuity. We guide each student all the way from their first lesson with us through to their university application. Before enrollment, all students are assessed. We check their level of English, since many of our students are not native speakers, and we also assess their knowledge of maths to ensure they are in line with UK standards. So then each student also has a general interview, which helps us understand their interests and aspirations. Then all of this is recorded in a central database that teachers can access from day one, so that they know exactly who they'll be teaching and how best to support them. Motivation starts with lesson design. Each class follows a structured arc. It's normally a warm-up, then direct input, interaction, and a reflective or independent task. We deliberately keep our text simple and consistent. Teachers do use memrise, mirror boards, quizzes, low-tech exercises that require students to contribute during the lesson. We also use Canvas, where teachers post assignments and students complete them. And this helps us with continuity and makes everything easily trackable. Google Chat, we use this for our video calls, which automatically stores all chat history, which is very important in group chats, also known as spaces. And this enhances continuity, as students and teachers can revisit shared resources and discussions at any time. Spaces also include interactive tools such as polls and threaded side conversations, which help keep students engaged and lessons dynamic. Our culture is based on visibility and presence, which means cameras on, voices heard, and this isn't just a rule, it's a norm that builds accountability. Of course, at the same time, we do acknowledge that students may sometimes have specific needs or well-being concerns that require flexibility. In such cases, and with prior communication from the families or mentors, we do and we can accommodate such needs. Our teachers actively involve students through guided discussion, among other things, Socratic questioning and class-wide debate, especially in subjects like humanities and business, and this encourages critical thinking and respectful articulation of ideas. So on the next slide, you will see the diagram that shows Socratic questioning that can be used to build thoughtful, student-led dialogue in lessons. So just to explain it, it all starts with a strong, open-ended question. Then students are invited to respond and teachers listen to their answers. Then teachers paraphrase to show that they've understood the students correctly. And from there, teachers ask follow-up questions, encouraging students to explain, justify, or expand on their thinking. Then we continue the dialogue with new questions, summarizing key points along the way and inviting others to contribute. And it is an ongoing, inclusive conversation that deepens understanding and helps students think critically together. So the next slide is a screenshot of chat spaces, Google Chat. It shows a threaded side conversation used here as a quick poll for a student to complete immediately after her A-level business progress test. On the right-hand side, you can see her responses, identifying which questions she found most difficult and what she would like to revise the following week. So this provides the teacher with an instant review and gives the student an opportunity to reflect on the work just submitted. Next slide, please. So what happens between lessons matters just as much. Each student has a dedicated academic mentor, someone who doesn't teach them, but supports them. So mentors collect regular feedback from teachers and meet with students at least once per half term to review their goals and progress. Then we track off-screen work, whether it is homework and it is submitted on time, whether it is done well, how much time a student spends on a given task. And Canvas helps us see how long students are engaged with their assignments. And if someone is slipping, we do tend to follow up quite quickly. Parents are kept in the loop. Teachers are encouraged to flag issues early, and we are always available to speak with families. So for all the students, we tie all of this into university planning. We have a dedicated university applications department that supports students from year 12 onwards. They meet students one-on-one and assign small writing tasks to help prepare them for personal statement writing. So a real life example, case study of one of our students, Kieran. He is a student in our IGCC English course. So while his spoken English is strong, and he has indeed a very impressive vocabulary, his grammar and writing skills were initially below the level of his peers, and it soon became clear that he was struggling to submit written homework. So his Canvas activity showed that he would open the assignment promptly after class, but then abandon it soon after. So we raised this with his parents, who explained that Kieran often felt discouraged and lacked confidence in his grammar, basically. In response, we worked closely with his English teacher to create a tailored intervention plan, and this included short individual sessions focused on grammar and small writing tasks designed to build confidence without overwhelming Kieran. Over time, this targeted support helped him re-engage with his work and begin submitting homework regularly with growing independence. So we know that some successful online schools use asynchronous modes of teaching. However, taking into account the typical profile of our students, we use synchronous approach and do not rely on pre-recorded videos. However, homework obviously is completed independently, yet our main instruction takes place live. So we don't assume students are engaged. We track attendance, punctuality, homework, and participation. These are reviewed regularly with students and shared with parents. Teachers record absence and lateness in our central online register, leaving comments when needed. And these entries are reviewed weekly by our academic team to monitor patterns and follow up where necessary. Teacher feedback is crucial. We ask staff not just to comment on academic performance, but also on attitude, participation, and collaboration. We also encourage teachers to give students ownership during lessons. That might mean letting them suggest examples or lead warm-ups or reflect on what helps them learn best that week. Quieter students aren't overlooked. We use targeted questioning and one-to-one check-ins to ensure everyone has a voice. Silence isn't treated as disinterest, but it is followed up on. So our termly reports include narrative feedback, not just grades. And this helps us, as well as parents and students, build a fuller picture of their motivation and development. So I'm happy to report that student behavior in our school is consistently good. And this is indeed due to the fact that expectations are clear, consistent, reinforced by every teacher. We also treat our students as young adults. We assume best intentions, but we also have firm boundaries. That is punctuality, camera use, attendance, and participation. This is easy to track in small size groups, where each student's engagement and behavior are clearly visible and easy to follow up on. Our lessons are normally calm, focused, and respectful. When a problem does arise, we don't make a show of it. We address it quickly and privately. So teachers foster mutual respect by creating routines of shared accountability. For example, in English lessons, students are encouraged to understand assessment objectives and mark schemes as if they were examiners. They regularly evaluate each other's work, discuss expectations using precise terminology, and give structured feedback. So this peer review approach not only builds subject knowledge, but also strengthens classroom culture when students feel responsible for their own progress and each other's, which is very important. So interactive methods like these reduce behavioral issues because students are constantly engaged and know they're being taken seriously. In small online groups, this approach is particularly powerful indeed. Distractions are minimized through dynamic participation, and that is real-time questioning, peer feedback, and visible roles for every student. Next slide, please. So, yes, we believe behavior stems from culture, not from punishment. Our approach is proactive, not reactive. We do frame rules positively, telling students what to do rather than what not to do. And even small changes can make a difference sometimes. For example, instead of saying, don't be late, saying be on time so you don't miss anything important may be enough for some students. We engage them actively in lessons, which naturally reduces misbehavior. Consistency is key. All teachers uphold the same expectations, and that builds a reliable, safe learning environment. This is especially important in an online setting where physical cues and classroom norms are less visible. So when students know exactly what is expected, they're more confident, hopefully less anxious, and are more likely to participate productively. A stable online environment gives students the psychological safety to take academic risks, ask questions, and be themselves. If a correction is needed, it's done respectfully and in private, not in front of the class. This preserves dignity and avoids escalation. We also involve families early as we can. If we see a pattern emerging, we speak to parents before things become serious. So ultimately, students rise to the level of responsibility we give them, and we are intentional about giving them responsibility and trust. Another student story, Alexandra, she's in her final year of A-levels. So she's now actually finishing her exams. She's been combining studies in an offline school overseas with online A-level qualifications at Bruton Lloyd. So when we initially tested Alexandra before enrollment, her English was at B1 nearing B2. But she left a strong impression in the interview, and her grades from her local school were excellent and matched our findings. So she wanted to enter UK university straight from her local school, which doesn't grant a qualification equivalent to A-levels. So we built a tailored path for Alexandra. She studied A-level maths, economics, and psychology with us, and she also took classes of IGCSE English as a second language in her first 18 months with Bruton Lloyd. I'm happy to report that she recently passed IELTS Academic with overall band 7.5 and has a conditional offer to study economics at City University of London. Alexandra actually benefited from quite a few practices we've discussed today. Among these, flexible scheduling, which allowed her to combine two systems of education, mentor support, which helped her stay on track with both academic and language goals, clear lesson structure and active engagement, which supported her in subjects that were new to her, and then personalized exam preparation and UCAS support, which helped her build confidence step by step. Alexandra notes that Bruton Lloyd teachers are much more approachable than in traditional offline schools. She says, it feels like we're working together. And she also says, I always knew who to go to with questions, whether it was about subject choices, exams, or my university plans. So just to illustrate her engagement further, this screenshot gives a quick glimpse of Alexandra's impressive performance in our English grammar course on Memrise. So if you look at the leaderboard, it shows how consistently she engages with her material, and she's clearly ahead. Overall, this course covers 57 key uses of English tenses and is designed to build mastery through daily bite-sized practice. And it is a great example of how gamified platforms can sustain student motivation and consolidate essential skills. So I would like to conclude my presentation with this diagram that captures the cycle that sustains motivation and good behavior in our school. It starts with the teacher input and what happens in the lesson, where good planning and engagement spark student participation. Then this student participation gives us meaningful feedback, both in terms of progress and any emerging challenges. And this enables mentors to provide targeted follow-ups, offering individualized support where and if it is needed. Mentors also help connect us with the families, who play a key role in reinforcing motivation outside of the virtual classroom environment. The insights we gain from families and mentors then feed back into lesson planning and teacher strategies. And this is obviously not a linear process, but rather a dynamic and interdependent system. So each part supports the others, creating a consistent, responsive, and supportive environment for every student. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I pass you back to Lewis.
Thank you so much, Pavel. Yeah, really fantastic to have heard the theory, but then also to hear how that actually looks in practice at one of our Cambridge Online approved schools. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And we might pick back on a few things that you said in the Q&A part coming up very shortly. So before we move on to that, I want to there we go. I want to just leave you with a few bits that I would like you to take away. And these could be some areas of further reading, some actionable things that you might want to go away and read and access and take away in your own time that you might find useful, because these are some firsthand things that I found useful myself as I was wanting to really deepen my understanding of online education and motivation in an online setting. So I first of all would like to introduce you to the book Online Teaching at its Best, which is about merging instructional design and teaching research. This is by Nilsson and Goodson. I would also like to recommend to you Small Teaching Online. It's very science-based, looking about how small cognitive steps can be taken to really scaffold learning in an online setting by Flower Darby. And also a book by Doug Lemov called Teaching in the Online Classroom, Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal. It was written post-COVID, but has some really fantastic takeaways in there, including one that I wanted to share with you specifically, which is about the lesson structure. Pavel alluded a few moments ago to the importance of how motivation, it all starts at the lesson planning stage of where all of these excellent interactions, these great little ways to foster a humane relationship with your mentor, they all generate from there. And in this book, Teaching in the Online Classroom, there is a lesson guide here, which I would really recommend. When I speak to online schools who are in their early stages of setting up their classes, I often share this with them as a way to start building that lesson structure in place. It's a 5-part lesson structure, which has lots of opportunities for collaboration, combining individual work, paired work, group work, and whole class. It simply goes like starter, introduction, main activity, an assessment, and a plenary, with a detailed breakdown in there if you want to find out more about it. But I recommend this structure to online schools who really want to capture everything that we've been speaking about today to create that positive culture and engage their students. I also want to point you in the direction of a few things on our Cambridge website, which will signpost in a communication to you after this webinar. I would like to point you in the direction of the Getting Started guide. So at Cambridge, we've produced a number of Getting Started guides that has information that will be relevant to people who are at their early stages of their online teaching career, all the way up to seasoned professionals. And it has lots of videos containing lots of advice and tips from teachers globally at Cambridge from our online school setup. And it looks at areas like assessments, on how to give feedback, how to engage, how to manage behavior, some challenges, some misconceptions. It's a really worthwhile read, so I recommend having a look at that. And finally, our blogs. So Matt James and I have written over the years a combination of 5 blogs, which you can see up here. We are quite often writing new ones, so you'll see them appear there in real time. They talk about areas like smarter platforms, about who is choosing online education, well-being, and I leave them there for you to read and encourage you to take those up in your own time. So yeah, very much worth a read. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand back to Kathleen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis and Pavel, for that very insightful session. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Matt James, our head of online education in the Cambridge International Education, to help us moderate and facilitate the Q&A session. So just a reminder for our attendees, we won't be releasing certificates for this session, and please do submit your questions in the Q&A function in your toolbar, and feel free to like the questions you'd like most for our panel to answer for today. Thanks, everyone.
Clear, and hello everyone. Great to be with you today, and really good to see such engagement and so many people joining this session. I think we got up to 650 participants at the peak, which is really good. Big thank you to Lewis and to Pavel for their presentations, which I found really interesting. I think what came across to me really strongly was being really intentional about creating that classroom culture. Also the structure, the processes and procedures that need to be in place to have effective online learning, and making lessons really interactive and engaging for students and varying the activities to help with that motivation. So some great ideas being shared so far, but let's get into some questions because a number of you have posted questions now in the Q&A, and you can keep doing so as we're talking. I think I want to come first of all to Pavel with a question, actually, because you talked about a lot of things there that you've obviously got right in your school. But I'm curious to know what are you still struggling with? You know, what is still a challenge for you, or what do you think you haven't quite cracked yet?
Making sure that students feel the sense of community outside the classroom. Always sort of expanding and thinking about how to make sure that they feel as part of a whole big system community outside their usual lessons that happen on a weekly basis. So when we approach this challenge through running mentor sessions, maybe some online games in real time, and that is through a sort of series of video calls or webinars. But we're still sort of adjusting or rather formulating the overall philosophy of how we could approach it more holistically. So it's an ongoing process.
Right, thank you. Question from Jessica. Perhaps Lewis, you can answer this one briefly. It's just asking whether we register online schools for early years or primary level.
All right, so yeah, we have a large part of our Cambridge pathway that's available. It's not available for early years, but it is available from primary all the way up to advanced, which is A level. So yeah, from ages primary to A level, yes.
And there's a question about synchronous teaching, which perhaps both of you can comment on. Can it be enhanced using AI tools? So to be actually responding to the student in real time, monitoring their ability and adding in further challenge for them. So how does AI work with synchronous lessons?
Well, this is a great way to point people towards another one of the blogs that we saw mentioned a few moments ago about the rise of smarter platforms. So there are a large number of schools out there using, of course, like Zoom and Teams for their classroom lessons. They're fantastic, but they, of course, were built with corporate meetings in mind. So there are a growing number of LMSs and platforms out there now that are being purpose-built for educational purposes that use AI really well. So one of the ways that I've seen that being used best is to monitor the engagement of breakout rooms and sessions where the teacher isn't. So if, for example, the students are sorted into 5 groups, the teacher cannot be in every place at every time, but AI can monitor the level of input, the level of engagement, and to make sure that talk is all on task as well. So that's a particularly useful example of what I've seen it being used for. So it's exciting to see what might come next.
Great. Pavel, anything to add to that?
I would say that we normally try to make sure that the classes are as engaging as possible so that we do not need to rely on any AI tools. And indeed, the small size of our classes sort of helps us maintain engagement through real human interaction. But it's very insightful and what Lewis mentioned, so I will look into it. But at the moment, we do not have any advanced AI strategies in place to help us along because we just don't need them.
And something that briefly just springs to mind is even in synchronous schools where students are getting that face-to-face interaction every day, as you mentioned, Pavel, there'll be times where they will complete some tasks offline away from the screen, maybe for homework or for group projects. And if they were to use AI in those instances, it could help with that feedback loop of making sure that they get that instant feedback even without a teacher face-to-face with them. So that's another consideration.
Yes, indeed.
People asking about becoming an online teacher. How does that work? But maybe Pavel, you can say something about the teachers that come to you and what you look for in the recruitment process.
So yes, valuable questions. A number of things: passion and empathy, real dedication, and proven track record of teaching online always helps. But at the same time, the latter part can be managed because we have onboarding protocols in place. We're always happy to support technically the teacher and observe as many lessons as needed to make them feel well connected and comfortable using all the online tools. But ultimately, it's checking that the specialist is able to use interactive tools or has heard of them before. Understanding how to approach safeguarding protocols and issues at hand in an online environment. And just confirming that they are passionate about their subject, good communicators, and are happy to engage with us on a almost 24/7 sort of basis to make sure that we are on the same page and we communicate and connect promptly if any problems arise.
Yeah, connected with that, we've had a question about the overall working hours for an online teacher and the length of the length of lessons. I guess it varies from one school to another, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, I assume. But at the same time, obviously, we do save. We make sure that our teachers are looked after really well, and obviously we respect their private time as well as yeah, they respect ours.
Can I add one thing to that, Matt, about saying, because one of the things, as I say, I get really excited about is speaking to online senior leadership teams from around the world. And one of the things I ask during approval process is a question very similar in that, what do you look for your teachers? And a common answer that I've had back from senior leaders in that moment is we look for teachers who seek the opportunity of online teaching and education by those tools, because there is a gap between the students and the teacher. We get that. It's different. It's a different way of learning, but it isn't just entirely fraught with obstacles. There are opportunities and new ways of doing things that would be actually not possible to achieve in a physical classroom. So they look for that degree of excitement in their teachers that they're recruiting and the degree of, like, yeah, let's give that a go. Let's try it, and openness to new tools and techniques. It was crucial.
And perhaps you can say something. There's been a few questions about online exams and what Cambridge is doing, working towards that.
Yes, so of course, when a student sits an exam at a Cambridge Online School, what they'll do is they'll go and sit in a testing centre as a private candidate, and we know that that can sometimes be a bit awkward. It can be a bit of a point of annoyance for the school, for the teacher, trying to find somewhere to accept them as that. But what we are doing over time at Cambridge is we are going through the digitalization process of our exams. So there will be a large number of exams appearing over time to be sat digitally. And we're adapting as much of our tools as we can at Cambridge to make that process as easy as possible. At Cambridge, we have the Find a Cambridge School page, which we've had some feedback on saying it isn't always perfect, but we are reaching out to all of our physical, of which there are about 10,000 physical Cambridge schools out there, reaching out to them saying, would you take private candidates to make this process as simple as possible for our students looking for somewhere to sit their exams?
Okay. And then another question asking, Pavel, how you deal with differentiated learning?
So just to recap, obviously we run a school with small classes and groups are between 3 and 6 students, which helps us spot any SEN or any other requirements that the student may need. Then we normally follow that up with intervention check-ins or intervention classes and one-on-one sessions, enhanced mentor support, communication with parents, making sure that we're all on the same page. The families give us as much background information as possible from day one. So we also are in touch with SEN specialists, and we have psychologists who would be able to assist, and we would involve them if and when needed. But in general, it's from the point of when we first introduce the student to the group and they interact with the group, having been assessed by us individually prior enrollment, we then track their progress, and if there is anything that that suggests that they need further support from us, we normally approach it from with a holistic sort of philosophy in mind, making sure that we are engaged with the family, with specialists, and with the teachers and with the students, so that if intervention is needed, it is done gently and through a multi-tier process, starting with conversations, then following up with one-on-one sessions, and then with any additional support that may be required. I hope
and differentiation is also an area where I've seen AI being used really carefully as well in some great examples. It's where a student's exact strengths and weaknesses are perhaps given to a lesson planning tool, and the lesson can be adapted to the exact needs of that learner, knowing where they've got to get to as well. So it's another example of where AI is supporting teachers with differentiation.
Okay, we're coming to the end now, and apologies we won't get through everybody's question, but I'd be interested to hear from either of you really. Do you think it's bringing it back to this idea about developing an effective classroom culture? Do you think it's harder for the online teacher to do that than it is for a teacher in a physical classroom setting?
Maybe. I don't know that I'd go so far as to say that it's harder. I was wearing my online education hat. I would say it's different. It's needing that you would have to pivot, use different tools, and approach things with a different mindset. In fact, there are teachers that contributed to another piece of Cambridge research in the last year that says that because of the extra effort that we put into these relationships with our students, we actually find that we have better relationships with them than we had when we were teaching in a physical classroom. Because of the additional and extra effort that they made, they find out new and different things about their students that they might not have seen come through before. So I would say it's a different challenge, but not altogether more difficult.
Yes, I would agree with Luke. I would actually say that what the online environment calls for is this more sort of proactive listening on the part of the teacher, and collecting as much information about the student as possible, examining their weaknesses and their strong points, basically sketching this profile of the student, making sure that they know them, their personality, their learner profile, their traits, and they lean against the strong points of the student, help them shine in the classroom environment, engage with them positively, and that all sort of falls into a beautiful picture of getting to know the student much better and engaging with them on a more personal level, which is very beneficial.
Great, thank you. Some of the questions have been, which I haven't dealt with, have been more specifically about certain subjects or particular resources about online teaching and learning. So I'd refer you back to the Getting Started guide as a good place to start that Lewis mentioned before on our website. And also, of course, for specific subjects, the the resources that are in the School Support Hub. But thank you for all the questions, some really interesting ones. And I'll hand back to Lewis to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And yeah, thank you very much to all of our people that have joined all over the world for our session today. We hope that you found some really actionable takeaways, some key points, and some food for thought as you go away and consider your next stages of work for your own school. But I would also like to very much thank Pavel for joining us from the Bruton Lloyd Online School. Your contributions were fantastic today. And as I said, great to get that context from you. Thank you to Matt for hosting the Q&A and for guiding us also directly through that. And for Kalia for hosting us at the beginning of the session. So with that, I will bid you all a farewell and wish you all a fantastic day. Thank you so much for joining today. Goodbye.